Audiobook Academy Biography presents Adolf Hitler. Germany's Nazi Party leader Adolf Hitler was one of the 20th century's most powerful and notorious dictators. In 1933, Hitler seized power in Germany by exploiting the country's economic troubles, public unrest, and parliamentary infighting. By the time the Nazis took over much of Europe in 1941 after their invasion of Poland in 1939, the world had officially entered World War II. More than 6 million Jews were murdered as a result of Hitler's anti-Semitism and obsession with Aryan supremacy. Hitler took his own life in a Berlin bunker in April 1945, as the war's tide turned against him. Childhood. In Braunau am Inn, an Austrian town near the Austro-German border, on April 20, 1889, Adolf Hitler was born. Adolf grew up in Linz, the capital of Upper Austria, when his father, Alois, retired from his post as a state customs employee. He dropped out of high school because he didn't want to be like his father, who was a public worker. Adolf continued his passion of being an artist, even though he was rejected from Vienna's Academy of Fine Arts. After the death of his mother, Clara, in 1908, Hitler relocated to Vienna, where he earned a living by painting landscapes and monuments and then selling the paintings. During his years in Vienna, Hitler, who was socially isolated and a voracious reader, developed an interest in politics and many of the concepts that would go on to create Nazi ideology. Adolf Hitler's military service and career. Hitler settled in Munich, the capital of Bavaria, in 1913. He successfully petitioned the Bavarian king for permission to join a reserve military regiment when World War I broke out the following summer. 2 gallantry awards were bestowed upon Hitler during the First World War, including the Iron Cross First Class, which he wore until his death. After the Battle of the Somme, Hitler was injured in the leg and temporarily blinded by a British gas assault near Ypres during the conflict. The armistice that ended World War I came as he was recovering in a hospital northeast of Berlin a month later. Adolf Hitler became convinced that Germany's crushing defeat could not be blamed solely to the Allies but to traitors at home, a fiction that would destroy the Weimar Republic and prepare Hitler for power. National Socialist Movement. At the end of 1918, after returning to Munich, Hitler joined the fledgling German Workers' Party, an organization whose goal was to reconcile the interests of the working class with a strong sense of national identity among the German population. Influential oratory and captivating energy helped catapult him up party ranks, and he left the army in 1920 to lead the party's propaganda effort. With Hitler's help, the newly renamed National Socialist German Workers' Party, also known as the Nazi Party, adopted a hook-shaped cross as its insignia in an effort to appeal to German workers. Nazi leader Adolf Hitler's swastika, a white circle on a red background, would come to symbolize terror in the years to come. In late 1921, Hitler was in charge of the Nazi Party, which had swelled in response to popular dissatisfaction with the Weimar Republic and the harsh conditions of the Treaty of Versailles. Ernst Röhm, a former army officer in Munich, recruited the strong arm squads, known as the Sturmabteilung, SA that Hitler deployed to defend party gatherings and attack opponents. Beer Hall Putsch. They stormed a large beer hall on the evening of November 8, 1923, when another right-wing leader was speaking to an enthusiastic gathering. After announcing the start of a national revolution and leading a march through Munich's city center, Hitler engaged police in a gunfight. Despite Hitler's hasty exit, authorities caught up with him and other rebel leaders later on. Though the beer hall putsch failed tragically, it elevated Hitler as a national figure and a hero of right-wing nationalism. Mein Kampf, German for My Battle. A treason trial resulted in Hitler being condemned to 5 years in prison, but he would serve only 9 months in Landsberg Castle. The book Mein Kampf, the first volume of which was published in 1925, was dictated to him at this time. After developing anti-Semitic beliefs while living in Vienna in his early 20s, Hitler outlined his vision for Germany and the rest of the world in this book. Mein Kampf's second volume would be completed at Berchtesgaden, a mountain town, after Hitler's release from prison. After Hitler's ascent, it became Germany's second best-selling book after the Bible, behind the Bible. It sold 6 million copies in the United States by the year 1940. In 1928, Hitler published his second book, the Zweitbuch, which featured his views on foreign affairs. Due to the poor sales of Mein Kampf, it was not published during his lifetime. The Zweites Buch was initially published in English in 1962 under the title Hitler's Secret Book. The Aryan Race. As a race-obsessed individual, Hitler believed that the Aryan race was at the pinnacle of a natural hierarchy. Rather than a democratic or parliamentary administration, Hitler saw the unity of the folk, the German people, in a single supreme leader, or Führer. In order to fulfill its destiny, Germany should take over eastern territories now occupied by inferior Slavic peoples, including Austria, the Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Russia, according to the manifesto Mein Kampf. The Schutzstaffel, SS. Some support for the Weimar Republic had returned by the time Hitler was released from jail, and support for right-wing causes such as Nazism appeared to be diminishing by then. The Nazi Party was reorganized and reshaped over the next 3 years by Hitler when he went into hiding. As a more trustworthy alternative to the SA, he formed the Schutzstaffel, SS, and the Hitler Youth, Hitler's youth organization. A personal oath of allegiance to Adolf Hitler was taken by members of the SS. During World War II, Heinrich Himmler would lead the SS from a handful of 200 soldiers to a force that would rule Germany and frighten the rest of occupied Europe. Eva Braun, Angela Raubal, Hitler's half-sister, and her 2 daughters frequently accompanied him to Berchtesgaden during these years. Geli Raubal, Hitler's blonde niece, committed suicide in 1931 after the dictator became obsessed with her. Hitler was devastated by the loss of Geli, whom he considered to be his one and only genuine love. When he met Eva Braun, a shop worker from Munich, he began a long-term relationship, but he refused to marry her. The Great Depression, which began in 1929, posed a new challenge to the Weimar Republic's stability. Nazi support was built up among German conservatives, especially military and commercial leaders, in order to influence Hitler's revolution. The Third Reich. As a candidate for president in 1932, Hitler received 36.8% of the vote, compared to Paul von Hindenburg, a war hero. 3 successive chancellors failed to hold control of the government, and Hindenburg selected the 43-year-old Hitler as chancellor in late January 1933, crowning the astonishing rise of an improbable leader. The Third Reich, or as the Nazis referred to it, the Thousand-Year Reich, was born on January 30, 1933, with Hitler's promise that it would last a millennium. Fire at Reichstag. Despite the fact that the Nazis never gained more than 37% of the vote in 1932, Hitler was able to gain absolute power in Germany because to the passivity of the majority of Germans who were opposed to Nazism. Hitler had an excuse to escalate political persecution and violence against his opponents after a devastating fire in Germany's parliament building, the Reichstag, in February 1933, possibly started by a Dutch communist, though later evidence revealed Nazis themselves set the Reichstag fire. After the Reichstag enacted the Enabling Act on March 23, Hitler was given complete authority and the old German establishment, i.e. Hindenburg, celebrated the unification of National Socialism and National Socialism. A statute declaring the Nazi Party the only political party in Germany was approved by the government in July of that year, and all non-Nazi political parties, unions, and other organizations ceased to function within months. With his grip on power in Germany firmly in place, Hitler turned his gaze westward. Foreign policy. After World War I, Germany faced a weak military and unfriendly neighbors, leaving it diplomatically isolated, France and Poland. In a famous May 1933 address, Hitler claimed that Germany was in favor of disarmament and peace. However, Hitler's primary goal remained unaffected by this appeasement strategy, the dominance and extension of the Volk. He had pulled Germany from the League of Nations by the beginning of the following year and had begun to militarize the country in preparation for his intentions to conquer territory. The Night of the Long Knives. During the tragic Night of the Long Knives on June 29, 1934, Hitler had Röhm, former Chancellor Kurt von Schleicher, and hundreds of other problematic members of his own party executed, especially those from the SA. Upon Hindenburg's death on August 2, military chiefs decided to combine the presidency and chancellorship into one position, meaning Hitler would have control of all of the Reich's armed forces. Jewish genocide. Jews were stripped of their German citizenship and forbidden from marrying or having relations with anyone who was of German or related blood as of September 15, 1935, when the Nuremberg Laws went into effect. In spite of the Nazis' efforts to downplay their persecution of Jews during the 1936 Berlin Olympics, in which German Jewish athletes were not allowed to compete, additional decrees over the next few years disenfranchised Jews and took away their political and civil rights over the next several years. Adhering to its anti-Semitic policies, the Nazi regime burned books, shut down publications, and used radio and film to spread the Nazi message. Teachers in Germany's educational system were also compelled to join the party. Secret state police, Gestapo, an SS wing that grew during this time, was responsible for much of the Nazi persecution of Jews and other targets. World War II. In March 1936, Hitler ignored the advice of his generals and ordered German forces to reoccupy the Rhine's demilitarized left bank. With little opposition from the United Kingdom, France or the rest of the international community. In the next 2 years, Germany formed alliances with Italy and Japan and annexed Austria. In May 1939, Hitler negotiated a non-aggression deal with the Soviet Union after confirming his alliance with Italy in the so-called Pact of Steel. Nazi troops entered Poland on September 1, 1939, triggering the declaration of war by Britain and France. Blitzkrieg. Adopting a general's plan to invade France through the Ardennes Forest, Hitler ordered the conquest of Norway and Denmark in April 1940. On May 10, the German Blitzkrieg, flash war, began, and Holland and Belgium rapidly surrendered. In late May, German troops reached the English Channel, forcing the evacuation of British and French forces from Dunkirk. Armistice was signed between Germany and France on June 22. As a result of Hitler's failure to get the United Kingdom to make peace with the Soviet Union, he launched an attack on that country in May 1941. Germany's alliance with Japan necessitated that Hitler declare war on the United States following the attack on Pearl Harbor in December. As the war dragged on, Hitler changed his goal from defeating the Soviet Union and Britain to forcing one of his two adversaries, the United States and the Soviet Union, to make peace with him. Concentration camps. A network of SS concentration camps, including the world-famous Dachau camp outside Munich, began operating in 1933 and housed Jews and other targets of the Nazi administration. The Nazis began exterminating Jews from German-controlled territory as soon as World War II broke out. Killing camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau were established in occupied Poland by Einsatzgruppen, or mobile death squads. Joseph Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, carried out cruel medical experiments on some Jews at Auschwitz in addition to forced labor and mass executions. Children were subjected to sickness, ugliness and torture as part of Mengele's medical research trials on twins. 6 million Jews were slaughtered in German-occupied Europe by the end of World War II, even though the Nazis also imprisoned and executed Catholics, homosexuals, political dissidents, Roma, gypsies, and the crippled. The end of World War II. The tide of the war began to swing against Germany after the defeats at El Alamein and Stalingrad, as well as the arrival of U.S. soldiers in North Africa at the end of 1942. As the war wore on, Hitler's health deteriorated, and he was increasingly secluded and reliant on pharmaceuticals provided by his personal doctor. In July 1944, Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg planted a bomb that burst during a meeting at Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia and nearly succeeded. Soon after the Allies' victorious invasion of Normandy in June 1944, cities all throughout Europe were liberated. In December of that year, Hitler launched a new offensive in the Ardennes in an attempt to divide the British and American armies. However, he retreated to a Berlin bunker beneath the Chancellery in January 1945. Despite the fact that Soviet forces were closing in, Hitler planned a last-ditch resistance. Death. April 28 to 29 marked Hitler's marriage to Eva Braun in his Berlin bunker. On 30th of April, Hitler shot himself in the head in his suite, while Braun took a lethal dose of poison. According to Hitler's orders, their bodies were set on fire. On May 7, 1945, with Soviet soldiers capturing Berlin, Germany formally ended the European war by surrendering unconditionally on all fronts. Although Hitler's thousand-year Reich only lasted about 12 years, it caused unimaginable havoc on Germany, Europe, and the rest of the world during that period. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.